Hey, everybody, welcome to the stream. I'm feeling great today. I am looking forward to the stream a lot, having a great day. Hope you are too. It's a Friday, which means weekend is almost upon us. And I've got some exciting new toys to play with. I had entered the GitHub Copilot chat beta waitlist some time ago. And it just happens to be the case that last night, I got an email saying, hey, you're accepted into the Copilot beta program. So that was pretty great because it's something I definitely wanted to feature on the stream, but I haven't yet got access to it. So what I've got here on the left side here, Visual Studio, I was actually going to use Writer today. Full disclosure here, I was going to switch over to Writer to try that for a while. But because I had the GitHub Copilot chat preview, I'm going to be in Visual Studio today. We'll maybe do Writer next time. Or maybe we'll find out if Writer has a Copilot chat plugin or something in the future. But anyway, this is a private beta, so you can sign up for it too. I think you just have to have a GitHub account to sign up for it. And as far as I know, you can use it in Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio. I don't know about Writer yet. I don't think it's quite available because it is very much a private preview. But here we go. We've got GitHub Copilot Chat is the main new feature that I'm most excited about in the GitHub Copilot private beta. And it is very similar to ChatGPT in the sense that I can use natural language here to ask it questions, but it also has some very cool features specifically just for coding. ChatGPT is meant for more than just coding. Copilot Chat is specifically for coders and developers. So it's going to give us, we're going to be able to highlight code in Visual Studio and send it to Copilot Chat, which I can do with a copy and paste here with ChatGPT, but it's a little bit more integrated here in Visual Studio. And it's going to give us suggestions and tips along the way, like, oh, you can, now that you've got this code example, you can do these actions with it. Or here's some related topics you might want to look into. So very cool. So what I thought we'd try to start with is just what I did on the last stream, is ask it to give me a FizzBuzz implementation and see how it does against ChatGPT. So let's see if it works here. Give me a FizzBuzz implementation for C#. The font's kind of small down there, but there you go. I'll give the exact same question to ChatGPT. Well, for one thing, the GitHub Copilot came back pretty quickly with that answer. So I don't know if maybe it's cached, maybe this is a common question, but that's one difference I'm seeing right now just with FizzBuzz is very, very fast. ChatGPT, of course, is very popular under a lot of strain, but I am on ChatGPT Plus, so this is what it's doing here. So it looks like, except for the static main and class program, that these are basically identical implementations. So there you go. So identical code, GitHub Copilot a little faster, a lot faster in this case. That may be due to a number of factors, but so we've already got some points of comparison. So we're going to get into some coding with the Conduit project. I want to show you one more thing with GitHub Copilot. Let's bring up, I was working on the auth controller last time. So let's bring up this. Now I'm going to go highlight this generate JWT token. Right click, now I've got this ask Copilot right here. So I can ask Copilot a question about the code that I highlighted. So I can ask it to explain the code. Let's do something a little more interesting. Let's say identify, how about this? Critique this code and identify any potential bugs and how to fix them. So something like a pair programmer. So I've got some text here. The code appears to be, can I zoom in on this at all? Anyway, I can make this font a little bigger. I guess I can do a zoom it. Let's run that real quick. This code appears to be functional and complete. One potential bug is that the login method is not performing any database validation of user credentials. So that's interesting because I didn't highlight the login function. I only highlighted generate JWT token. So it kind of went outside its bounds there. I'm wondering if, I wonder if Ask Copilot doesn't actually use the code that I highlighted. Oh, look at that. I can also, how can I close? There we go. So that's interesting. Let's see what else I had to say. To fix this, a to-do comment can be replaced with code that checks the user credentials. Yep, I already know about the to-do. Additionally, the random string test is being used for bio username. Yep, it's not a random string, but I know what it means. So yes, it's basically telling me what I already know, is that this is not a complete implementation. But it also didn't highlight any bugs or anything that might be a problem in this code. So it's kind of good. There isn't any exception handling. That's one thing I might be curious about. What are possible exceptions that might be thrown by this code? The only thing else I'd highlight is that these keys right here are hard-coded, which is potentially a maintenance problem, potentially a coupling problem, because I have them hard-coded elsewhere in the program. And that's actually something I have a ticket for back in my little GitHub projects board, is to, where is it? It might be in this issue right here, is to, no. Did I have that somewhere? I thought oh, here it is. Yeah, move issuer, audience, and secret into app settings, because they're hard-coded right now. So that's definitely on the horizon, something I need to fix. So anyway, so that's something that GitHub Copilot can do. Pretty cool, and might use it a little more today as we get going. So with that in mind, let's get back to work on Conduit. I have a lot of stuff I want to accomplish today. If we go back to projects here, I notice I moved this issue. It wasn't update docs before. I moved it back to in progress because I realized there's a bunch of stuff I still need to do. So, for instance, I need to add tests, and I need to add the database check in here, right? Because it's not actually checking anything. Anyone can hit this endpoint and get a token, and that's not really what this endpoint is meant to accomplish. That probably would pass Conduit's tests, but that's not a real-world function, right? That's the whole idea with this real-world project. And so, if you are joining for the first time or watching this for the first time, Conduit is actually a open source real-world demo project, a real-world example app. So it is So if we go to real world here, this is a GitHub project, but there's actually a website. We can find it somewhere right here. So what you want to do with this project is, there's lots of hello world and examples and to-do lists out there. This is more of an application that is attempting to be a little more real world without being, super complex. It has front ends and back ends and full stacks. So if you're looking to build something, let's say you're looking to build, you're looking to build an application with Express and Bookshelf, but you've never done that before, or you're curious to see if there's something you could do better with Express, or you use Express but not Bookshelf, something like that. You could go to these examples, look into the repo, and you'll see a full implementation of the real world spec, the what's called Conduit spec, and they all follow the same spec. So it's the same set of operations, functionality across the board. And so what I'm doing is I'm creating one for an implementation that does not exist yet. So you can see right here, I've got my WIP. This is for ASP.NET Core 7 and Couchbase. And that's what I'm working on right now. Working on the implementation of that real-world starter kit. Real-world example app. I use the starter kit. So I forked that, and I'm already starting on that. In the last stream, I got the basics of JWT in place, and that is what this endpoint is doing. It's going to check the user in the database. I don't have that there yet. And it's going to get a token, JWT token, which is a form of authorization. And that's how it's built there. And I tested that with a throwaway endpoint right here called delete me and hello, because I'm going to get rid of this. But if I put this authorized tag on there, the user must have a valid JWT token to access this endpoint. Got my giant That Conference mug full of coffee today, second cup of the day. Maybe that's why I'm feeling so good today. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete me. Don't need it anymore. But we're going to work on this part right here, checking the database to make sure the credentials are valid. So, in order to do that, I'm going to need to connect to Couchbase. Over here, I'm going to add some dependencies. So let's go ahead and see what kind of NuGet packages are out there for Couchbase. And I know I'm going to add, but I'm just going to go through them here in NuGet. So the very first result is the most popular, Couchbase Net Client. This is the .NET SDK for working with Couchbase. This is the bare minimum you need to interact with Couchbase from a .NET application. So this is all the operations like get, delete, query, text search, all those sorts of things, managing buckets, scopes, and collections, all that sort of stuff. Next most popular one is linked to Couchbase. I don't think I'm going to use that in this project. I might change my mind in the future. But if you want to write link, which is .NET language integrated query, it kind of looks like SQL, but right in your C# code. This will translate those link statements into Couchbase SQL++ queries. And the last one, dependency injection. This one is gradually creeping up in popularity as well, because it's a little bit newer than these other libraries, but it's definitely very popular. It's dependency injection for Couchbase, which I plan to use. Dependency injection is built into ASP.NET these days, so no reason not to add it in. So there's going to go ahead and do that. Okay, and I'm also going to add Couchbase Net Client. I think this is actually one of the dependencies. I'm going to add it anyway, since I might need that later for tests. Doesn't hurt to add it. Okay, so there we go. So now I need to inject Couchbase into possibly this controller. We'll talk about that in a second. But let's go to the program to get it set up. Okay, now I'm going to try to remember. I could remember how to do this from scratch, but let's also let's try asking Copilot. So how do I add DI for Couchbase with the Couchbase dependency injection library into my program.cs? See what it has to say. Okay, so add the library. Yep. Okay, so now it's got this configure services, which I don't have. When I created a new project, it didn't give me a configure services method. So this might be, going on code that's a little bit out of date. Like this might be ASP.NET 6 scaffolding, or maybe there's a way I can put configure services back in there. But in any way, I can use this code. I can say, all right, I can add this line right here, services.add Couchbase. It's going to be after add controllers. Let me put it after Swagger, after auth. That's totally fine. Put it right in here. And I need to say, of course, builder.services. And configuration is also not something I have. I have to say builder.configuration. So that's going to get a section of configuration code from app settings, or from wherever, environment variables or app settings.developer, whatever is available. Okay, and so let's go ahead and add that. And let's see if ChatGPT can help us with the app settings. Okay, what should the Couchbase section in app settings.json look like? What do you say, Copilot? You got any help for me? Okay, look at that. Give me all kinds of stuff. So I think this looks right. Bucket seems like a bit too much. Just I know from experience I don't need to have all that configuration in there. What I really need is bucket name, probably, so I'm going to stick with. I don't need to go all that deep of configuration. And this is conduit, so I'm going to call this bucket conduit. Username and password, I'm just going to stick to administrator password. Now, I actually need to go back and replace these with the real credentials, but I can't show you those on the screen for security reasons. But that's what's going to be in there. And I'm also going to put this into the app settings JSON, not the non-developer one. even though I'm going to be using development today. In the future, in production, I don't necessarily want to use development JSON, so I'm going to have those copied over here as well. Okay. So why don't I go to Couchbase and get some credentials. Now, again, I can't show you all this stuff, but I'm going to log in to my Couchbase Capella. This is a trial. It's a free trial. If you want to sign up, you can do so. You can also download it locally if you want to. You can use it in Docker, that sort of thing. But I like the DBAS version of this. Okay. Be careful not to show any credentials, but if I go into query or data tools, and then I go into buckets. So buckets is kind of like the Couchbase equivalent of a database or a catalog. This is a high-level organization, and also includes configuration like what kind of storage engine, how much RAM are you going to give it, etc. So I'm going to create a bucket here. I'm going to call it conduit. I do want memory and disk. So the difference here is memory only would be great for caching or kind of transitory processing of data. Data that's you don't really care if it lasts a long time. Actually, you probably don't want it to last a long time, that sort of thing. Or if you need really, really high performance, you want to skip the disk completely. But I'm going to stick with memory and disk because I want this data to be persisted to disk for the long term. Storage backend. Got two options here, CouchStore and Magma. Magma is designed for very, very large data sets that will not fit into memory. And so it's got improved kind of access of data on disk. For my use case, CouchStore is totally fine. I don't plan to have a ton of data in here, but just know in the long run, like if I were building so Conduit is meant to be a clone of medium.com, which is a very famous blogging social media type site. If I were building that for real, I might consider using Magma because there'll be a ton of data in there, and I don't necessarily want it all in memory because older blog posts, for instance, are not going to be accessed as much as newer blog posts. So it makes sense for me to use Magma. But for my purposes, I'm going to stick with CouchStore. For this implementation, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to make a noticeable difference. Memory quota, same sort of thing. So again, if I want to improve the amount of caching that's available to my database, I want to maybe jack this up. I have 1.5 gig available. The minimum is 100 meg. So every bucket in Couchbase has a built-in cache, so you have to give it some sort of memory. I'm going to stick with 100 here. Conflict resolution, it's not going to be a problem. I'm not going to use XDCR. I'm not going to replicate between data centers, for instance. Durability level, again, this is probably fine to leave at none. We might revisit this in the future. It depends on how we model the data, but none is probably fine for now. Replicas, I'm going to stick with the minimum. If I can even, okay. That's only available if, what? Maybe it's not available in the trial. It's just sort of grayed out, I guess. So I'm not sure what the default is. Maybe no replicas because it might be a single node. Again, for trial reasons, you don't necessarily need a bunch of nodes. Flush, don't really care about flush, not going to use it. Not going to use TTL either. Again, that might be great for caching or other use cases where your data is only living for a certain amount of time. So that's enough information for configuration. There we go. I've got the conduit bucket created. And we'll talk about what I'm going to put in that bucket in terms of scopes and then further collections. We're not going to get that far just yet, but we'll have to think about that very, very shortly. So now I'm going to take this off the screen because I need to put some credentials in. And I don't want you to see those credentials. Okay. So over on settings, there is a database access. So I can create a database access, kind of like a username. I can show you this, in fact. So this is, so I already created the bucket. Now I'm going to create, which is essentially a username or credentials, but there are two different things here for accessing data. A user is really what I'm using right now to get into this web-based screen. A database access is what my application will be used to connecting. So I'm going to call this SVC. I always call my users SVC for some reason, like an old habit, I guess. And conduit. and then I can put in a password, and I'll do that off the screen here. I can select which bucket it has access to, so I can choose Conduit, Twitch Chat, or All. I'm just going to stick to Conduit, obviously. All scopes, I'm probably only going to use the one default scope, and read-write, because I will be doing reads and writes. So I can't create this yet because I don't have a password. So take this off screen, and copy that. Let me just write this down somewhere. Okay, has to be a strong password. Okay, so that's created. And very exciting. Not seeing this on the screen, I'm sure, but let me tell you, it's not very exciting if you're seeing it either. It's just a bunch of random letters. Okay. So that's all I need with Capella right now. I'll have to come back to buckets here in a second. But now I'm going to take that information and put it over in my app development JSON file. Okay, and hopefully I won't accidentally open that file in the future. But now that's entered. Okay. So once that's in app settings, this code right here is going to pull those settings from the app settings and connect to Couchbase. And so hopefully that should work just fine. So now what's happening is if we go back to our Copilot up here, there are some options with the Couchbase dependency injection. So what I've got right now might be enough. I can also add a bucket or some singleton of a certain bucket objects. I don't necessarily need to do that right now. And maybe you'll see what I mean when I get going here. But what this does is it's going to make a service available for Couchbase in dependency injection. The other thing I need to do is clean this up. So when the app closes, I want to close the database connection as well. Otherwise, there could be potential for memory leaks or errors, things like that. Always a good practice with any database. So let's see if Copilot can help me. Can you create some, you know what? I'm just going to order it. Create some code for program.cs that will close the Couchbase dependency, close the Couchbase connection using the Couchbase dependency injection classes. This is something I always have to look up every time because I basically do it once per project, and I don't have it memorized or anything. So let's see what it comes up with. Okay, so this isn't quite right. It's close though. So application stopped. So this is no longer, I think, the correct syntax for this. It's a little bit outdated. So what I think's going on here is that GitHub Copilot chat, like ChatGPT, is kind of trained at a point in time, and anything that happens after that, it doesn't really know about. This is not going to work, so it means we're going to have to look it up probably. I think I have it actually in another project, like my Twitch chat, a TwitchBot project. So I'm just going to look it up there, and we'll see how close ChatGPT got. What's going on here? Okay. All right, so this is the actual code it should be doing. app.lifetime.application stopped. And then register. And then instead of just app dispose, I don't think I want to app dispose anyway. That's kind of a weird thing. But I want to get the lifetime service. Hey, Gamlor, what's going on? Long time no see. Welcome. Welcome to today's stream. Welcome back. So if you're all not familiar with Gamlor, he is a longtime contributor to the C# Advent. And he's a guy I've known for a long, long time, way back to my days in was it DB4.0, Gamlor? Is that where I first met you? Some DB4.0 content? Wow, long time. But Gamlor has a great blog. He does these great kind of stick figure illustrations, and always interesting contributor to C# Advent. Yeah, DB40 times. Gosh, that was my first foray into NoSQL was DB40, which was a pretty cool little library for NoSQL. I believe it was Java originally, and they created a .NET version by kind of automatically generating a version of the Java library. Don't think they're around anymore. I think they got bought by someone else and just kind of dissolved or morphed into some other project. But I'm onto new NoSQL now. It is Couchbase, right? So, lest you think that NoSQL is something new in my life, although I don't know why you think that. I've been at Couchbase for 7 years. DB40 was really my first NoSQL. And I think my first ever conference presentation was on DB40. Richmond, I think, back in the early 2010s. And it was a terrible presentation. My first one ever was terrible. But I had a lot of fun learning about DB40, and I wanted other people to learn about it. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. I have a lot of fun writing C# and Couchbase and JWT and Twitch and all this kind of stuff. Oh, you were at the company. Hey, Brant. Brant Burnett is in the house, everybody. Subscribing. Thank you for that, sir. Appreciate that. Brant Burnett, speaking of NoSQL, is been using .NET and Couchbase longer than I have. So thanks for stopping in, Brant. Thanks for the subscription. So, Gamler, you were at the company. I can't remember what the company was called. It started with a V, I think. Versant or something like that. So you got bought. Brant, first time chat. Appreciate it, man. DB4 team got moved to their cash cow projects. Versant. Yeah, wow. How am I remembering all these crazy details? So DB40 died. Yeah, unfortunate because it was pretty cool for its time. It had a link provider, I think, if I remember correctly, in .NET. A link provider for, well, it wasn't really link. Maybe it was just like a bunch of extensions, but maybe it was. It was very link-like. DB4 objects got bought by Versant, which was bought by Actian later. Oh, okay. A little history for you. See where Actian is these days. But speaking of link, I mentioned this earlier in the stream. Brant Burnett is one of the main contributors to the Link to Couchbase project, which may or may not get to in the conduit implementation here. We'll see how it goes. But Brant is a tremendous open source contributor to Couchbase stuff and beyond. So I'm glad he's here. I'm glad he's hanging out. And thank you very much for the subscribe there. Okay, so this will close down the Couchbase service when the application itself stops. And I think that's all I need to get going. So over here in auth controller, so I think what I can do if I wanted to is I could say, what is it? I bucket provider. And I could put that right here. And this bucket provider is part of the dependency injection. And then what I can do here is I can start using that bucket provider. I can say var bucket equals bucket provider dot get bucket. Okay, so this is the IntelliCode or whatever, and I'm starting to get really annoyed with IntelliCode because I keep hitting tab and it keeps making suggestions that are not valid suggestions. So I might turn off IntelliCode. Get bucket async. I'm going to get the conduit bucket. Now I can actually make this a named provider if I wanted to, so I don't have to hard code conduit every time. But let's just start getting it working, and then we can refactor. From bucket, I can say, give me the collection. Oh, this should be a wait, by the way. See, another thing that IntelliSense is getting wrong. Awaits bucket dot default collection async. Now, I probably don't want to use default collection because I'm going to have multiple collections, I think. So I'm going to say bucket dot collection async. All right, I've had about enough of IntelliCode. How do I turn off IntelliCode? How do I turn off IntelliCode in Visual Studio? I gotta say, of all these GPT, Copilot type things, IntelliCode is the most annoying. It's pretty cool for a demo, but the way I use Visual Studio and hit tab and stuff, it is really annoying me. So, all right, open Visual Studio, Tools, Options, IntelliCode. Options, IntelliCode somewhere in there. Okay. Disable IntelliCode. I don't see a disable IntelliCode option, but I can just turn this stuff off. Okay. Tiny button in the lower left of code window. This one right here, IntelliCode. Okay. Interesting. All right. It's right next to my Copilot button. So, all right. So that collections. I don't know where it comes from. That might be like how it works in Node or something. It's not get collection async. It's collection async. Copilot is also giving suggestions potentially. Well, yeah, we'll see how that goes. I thought Copilot mainly goes off of comments, but it might give suggestions too. We'll see how it works. Copilot chat is what I'm most interested in, frankly. Suggestions in the actual coding window have not really been helpful for me on a day-to-day basis. There, again, cool demo, but kind of gets in the way. So let's name this collection. Okay. And now what I can do is I need to do two things. So I need to make sure credentials match, and I also need to return a user with a JWT token. Okay, and I'll show you the spec for that in a second here, but let's go ahead and get a Couchbase collection. Now, I called the collection users with a capital U. Let's go first. Let's look at the conduit spec. Where is that spec at? Here we go. API spec. So the endpoint we're working on is authentication endpoint. It's the login endpoint, and this is the request body. So if you look at this login view model corresponds to that. So I've got this user. They kind of structure this way, and then email and password as part of that. Hey, what's going on, Calvin? Bada bing, bada boom. Welcome. You see, I got the Copilot chat beta. Oh yeah. Going to cause some problems now. What's going on, Calvin? Make sure you follow Coding with Calvin TV. I'm not sure if he's doing any streaming yet. Maybe you can let us know, Calvin. But let's see. Does my shout out work? Coding with Calvin TV. I don't remember. Is it shout? Yeah, there we go. All right. Oh, by the way, the bot's working again today. Oh, you're not. You're going to get back to streaming eventually. Yeah. So Calvin's building some cool stuff with Visual Studio extensibility. So all kinds of plugins and things for Visual Studio. Very cool. Definitely give him a follow anyway. If he streams, you'll know about it. It's not Slap. It's Trout. So you got to go Trout Coding with Calvin TV, like so. And then I will slap that person around with a large trout. Okay, so that's the login model. So that corresponds to this. What's going to do is it's going to return a user. So if you look at user, this is the user that's being returned for authentication. So it returns email, token, username, bio, and image. And I think that's the only time users return. So there's also this thing called profile, which is a little different than user. It's a different view. So, but it has some of the same fields. So username, bio, image, and following. Following is a little different. It's not returned by user for authentication. So I think these are going to basically be two views of the same piece of data. I think that's how I'm going to model it. So profile is only going to be like a virtual. There's not going to be a profile bucket. There's going to be a user's bucket, but a profile view of that user. Articles, comments, tags. So that's the way I'm going to structure it, I think. I need to create a user's bucket. So One thing I could do is I could just manually create that bucket and move on. Well, I've been inactive, so there we go. I could go into Conduit, and I could go into, oh wait, gotta go Data Tools. Could go into the Conduit bucket and the default scope and create a collection here. I could do that. Another thing I could do is I could use my own project, NoSQL Migrator, to create the collection for me. So I think I might do that. Let's just see how that works. I'm going to add a new project. This is going to be a class library. And class library, there we go. I'm going to call this conduit.migrations. Okay. And then in conduit migrations, I've got a NuGet package. I think I have this in NuGet. Oh, not there. NoSQL migration. What do they call it? NoSQL migrator? Yeah, there it is. You can see 98 downloads with a package description of package description. So this is cutting edge stuff. 001 alpha, right? But I'll go ahead and install this. And this is inspired by, not a fork of or anything, but inspired by the Fluent Migrator project, which is a project that allows you to programmatically create tables, update columns, foreign key constraints, all that kind of stuff with relational. So I created one that will do a similar thing with Couchbase. It will create collections, scopes, could create documents, all kinds of it can update existing documents, things like that. So it just makes it kind of gives it a little more formality to the definition of it. So I'm going to show you what I mean by this. So we're going to say migration. Yep. And number 1. And so I'm going to create a user collection in default scope. And that's going to, what is it? Is it migrate? Yes, migrate. So that's its base class of migrate. And that gives me an up and a down. So if you're familiar with migration frameworks, they all kind of work like this. You have an up and a down for each migration. An up is you're going to add something. Down is you're going to roll that change back. So in this case, I'm going to create collection. I'm going to call it users in scope. And I'm just going to be the default. I think it might do that anyway, but I want to be more explicit. So, and then in the down, I'm going to delete collection users from scope. Oh, I also have a default scope. I wonder if I have that too. From default scope. Do I have an in default scope? If not, I should add that in. Yeah, I don't have that. So that's something that's missing from my library. While I'm thinking about it, let's go and add that as an issue. Groves NoSQL Migrator. Unless I already have it in there. Nope. Okay, new issue. In default scope is missing from create collection. And I'll put a little sample of code in here so I remember what I'm doing. Should be instead in default scope. So if you're not following along, basically what I'm doing is I'm adding an issue to my own open source project because I noticed I'm missing something. So if I ever get some time to work on this project again, I'll go ahead and take on this issue. Anyway, back to what I was doing. Okay. I need to rename this class. So the way I do this is I give them numbers. How do I... See, this is the problem with me going back and forth between Writer and Visual Studio. So I don't remember the shortcut keys. Okay, so I'm going to call this 001 just so that the file names themselves are going to be in order of how they're going to be run. This is just kind of something that I do, so that as I keep adding more and more of these, it will list them in order in Solution Explorer and in a file directory. You don't have to do that, but something I like to do. Okay, the other thing I need to do, and I should have done this while I was over here in Visual Studio, or in GitHub, is I need to download the runner. So there's actually a executable that I'm going to download. I'm going to put in my folder. Oh, where is it? Oh, it's Real World, not Conduit, Real World. Okay, and let's just put it there for now. You know what? I could also put it in my path. So I have a lot of developer tools that I put in the path here, just so I can run them wherever I want to. Okay, an issue with this I'm already seeing with the stream is that I'm going to run this executable, I have to give it credentials. So let's see. If I do NoSQL migrator runner. So this is a command line tool that I wrote to run those migrations. And what you do is you give it a name of an assembly, so a DLL file, a connection string, username, password, bucket name, and then you can give it these optional, if I want to go a certain migration level up or down, that sort of thing. So what I need to do is I need to say NoSQL. So I need to go into migrations, and I'm going to do this. Let's make a batch file for this. Okay. So I'm going to make a batch file. NoSQL. Let's just do it here. NoSQL runner. Okay. And I need to give it a assembly name, which is going to be let's see. Conduit migrations bin. Was it debug? Net 7, and then wait. Is there another folder I'm missing? So many folders deep. Migrations bin debug net 7. Oh, I haven't compiled it yet. That's why. So once I compile it, DLL will show up there. Okay. Back to the console. Whoa. Okay. So that's going to be the start of what happened here. Okay, let's try this again. NoSQL migrator runner. Conduit migrations bin debug net 7 conduit migrations.dll. Okay, so let's start with that. Why can't I copy and paste this? Oh, there we go. So I'm just creating a batch file kind of off screen here. What are the other, okay, so I need to do this. Okay, then the next thing is connection strings. This is going to be Couchbase's whatever. Username, which is, what do they call it, SVC conduit. Password, which is my password. I'm not going to show that to you. Bucket name is conduit. And so I'm going to migrate everything up. That is the default. I don't have to specify a direction or limit if I don't want to do that. So I'm going to default everything up. So this is my batch file. I'm going to save this to the root here. And maybe we'll see that as part of this. If not, we'll add that file. How do I add that? Add existing item. Where did I put it? What happened? Oh, I put it in the, okay, gosh. It got moved into the Twitch folder accidentally. Where is it? Matt's Twitch bot. Migrate. So I'm going to put that over here. I've got all kinds of windows opening up over here. See, some people are bad with browser tabs. I'm really bad with File Explorer windows. I have so many everywhere. Okay, real world conduits. Put that right in there. So there's the migrate up. Just add that to the project. So I need to actually go and create, put the actual connection string in here. And I have to do it off screen again, because I've got actual credentials. Oh, you know what? I never got the actual connection string from Couchbase Capella. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Again, I don't want you to see this. Potentially it's not a problem, but just in case, I don't want you to see it. Okay, so let's replace that connection string there. SVC conduit. And the password. Okay, now let me run this. Just testing it off screen here, just in case there's any problems with showing. Oh, yeah, it shows the. I need to turn echo off, I think, if I remember correctly. But let's see if it actually works. Connection failed. There was an error because it failed to respond. Well, that's not good. Okay, so let me just turn echo off here real quick. Okay, so now I can move it back on the screen. So you can see I'm running my migration script, and this just runs an executable, a local executable that will go through these migration classes and then do what it says in here. But for whatever reason, it says it cannot connect. And I'm wondering why that is. So again, I got to take this off the screen just to confirm that I have the right stuff in there. Yep, that all makes sense. So why isn't it connecting? Make sure I have my IP in there. Matt's home computer. It's already in there, so that's not the issue. I can actually set up a loud IP address to connect to Capella. That's not the problem. I already am connected to that. So what isn't it like? Great collection users. Okay, so seems like it's not wanting to connect. All right, well, this is something I don't really want to go through and debug too much today. This is something I might do off the stream. Hey, Aaron's here. I got to get rid of these Snoop Dogg ads. Excuse me, Aaron. Snoop Dogg is spelled with 2 G's. D-O-double-G. Hello. Don't want to insult Snoop Dogg. Is my coffee still hot? Yeah, a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to work on that later, but essentially the end result of this is that I'm going to be creating in my... Whoa. Everything just went off the screen. There we go. In my conduit bucket, you're always correcting my bad spelling. I'm just trying to help you navigate the dangerous waters of insulting Snoop Dogg. That's all I'm trying to do. So inside this default scope, I'm going to add a users collection. So there we go. Kind of equivalent to a table in the relational world, if you're familiar with relational databases. A collection is a very similar level of organization. Notice I didn't have to define any sort of columns or any sort of schema. It's just a collection of JSON documents. Now, in this case, all those documents will look the same in their structure, but I don't have to define that up front in Couchbase. Okay. So this will go ahead and look in that collection to make sure their credentials match. So it's going to have to figure out how I want to store these documents. I think the easiest way would to be if I could get the user by collection.get And if I use the user email as the key. Now, one thing I have to consider here is that in Couchbase, keys cannot be changed to a document. I cannot change that key. They are immutable. That's what I'm looking for. So, let me just look in the Conduit API, is there a way to change email address? Because if there is, then I can't use that as the key. So let's look at this. So registration, this is creating my user for the first time. Specify the password or specify the email address there. Get current user, update current user. So this makes me think that I can update the user update the user's email address. Or maybe not. Maybe this is what it's using as the key. If it's using this as the key in the spec, then that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. Get profile, follow users. Okay. So I think that is the case. I can use email address as a key. Now, in the real world, real world, beyond the real world project, that's probably not an ideal key to use for a user. Because I may want to change my email address. I may want to, if I use my business email address and I switch to a different company, I can't get access to those emails anymore. So I may want to change that. But for our purposes, it looks like not an issue for Conduit. So I'll go ahead and use the email address as the key. That should be fine. Okay. So I can get the user. Then I can say get the user object is going to be user.content as user, which I created last time, I think. So let's look at the user. Okay, so this has the token in it. There's another view, as I mentioned earlier, called profile, which is a different view of the same user. So I think I'm going to be fine with this. Email token username bio image. Email token username bio image. That's going to be fine. That's going to be kind of the primary. That's what's actually stored. Following, not sure. We'll see how that goes. Following might also be stored there as well. But let's go with that for now. You know what? What is following supposed to be? It's just false. Okay, I think I understand what this is. So this is not who I'm following. It's am I following this person? So this is meant to be a public profile. Notice there's no email address in here. So am I following this person or not? So that's not data that's going to be stored in that user's profile. I would not put everybody who's following this user in that user profile. That would be, I think that would be the wrong design. So I think we're good with this right here. So it's going to get that user out, and then it's going to say if model.user.password equals user object dot, well, password's not in there. We can say not equals. And then to do is return unauthorized. Calvin's to jump up about 30 minutes for a meeting. I'll be back. All right, Calvin. I'll hold you to that. 30 minutes. Starting the clock now. And one good thing about the way my schedule works here at Couchbase is that I don't have a lot of Friday meetings. Thursday is my big meeting day. Oof, so many meetings on Thursday. Friday, not so much. Although I do have a meeting later on today with Brant. So I'm looking forward to that meeting, actually. But yeah, pretty light meeting day for me today. Okay, so this is not working for a couple reasons. So for one, don't have user in here. Okay. 2, should not store passwords as plain text. That's a bad idea. So what I need to do is in this user, I should say something like does password match? And I'm going to put model.user.password like that. Okay? Oh, if it does not match, return unauthorized, which I think is just, what? Not authorized? Unauthorized, maybe. Yeah, unauthorized. Which is, what, 501 or something? 401? I don't know what it is. One of those codes. 401, that's right. So I'll create a does password match function here in the user object. Why not? Okay, now this is where I need to decide how am I going to hash hash passwords. And the question is, where do I put that logic at? So why don't I go ahead and write it first, and then we figure out about refactoring. I eventually need to write some tests around this too. Okay, so let's ask Copilot to help me out. So can you write me a method to securely hash a plain text password in C#? Okay, it's taken some time, so why don't we go ahead and ask ChatGPT the same thing. And we'll see what happens here. Okay, so there we go. We've got a verify password function. And ChatGPT, I didn't hit the submit button. So for some reason, on normal browsers, hitting enter works fine on ChatGPT, but on this Visual Studio window, I have to actually hit the button. Okay, so it's using SHA-256. Oh, okay, but it's actually a stretching technique to make the hash more secure. Here's an example. So PBKDF2 is what's recommended over here as well. That's interesting. So it's creating a hash password function. This is creating a verify password function. Should the user be a record? You're talking about C# record? Maybe. What are some pros and cons? Hey, it's Surly Dev. What's going on? Surly Dev's a moderator? When did I give him moderator? Oh my goodness. When did I make that mistake? Welcome back, Surly Dev. Good to see you. So, Aaron, why don't you give me a quick rundown of the pros and cons of using a record for this user class? Keeping in mind, I do want to add a method to it here for hashing, or maybe I don't want to add a method for hashing. Okay, so this is hashing the password using PBKDF, whatever that means. Converting to base string, so getting the bytes is using some salt, which is always good to have salt. Okay, this one over here, it looks kind of similar. Hash bytes, convert, RFC 2898 derived bytes, so something different than that. Oh, no, here it is, RFC derived bytes. So it looks like the same sort of thing. This has a loop in it, though. Compare the computed hash with the stored hash. This is interesting. It has a for loop to compare the hashes. I'm not sure if that's what I want to use or not. This returns a string. And I want to actually create hashes later when I'm creating new profiles. So I think I want to go with a ChatGPT here in this case. This is totally fine code over here. It looks like it's the same sort of stuff. But this is, I think, more in line with what I'm looking for. When I asked that question, create me a method. What did I say? My question was, write me a method to securely hash a plain text password. This doesn't actually create the hash. Oh wait, I skipped something. So here's the method to create the hash. That's what I want right there. This is the method to verify. Okay, to verify, use the following code snippet. All right, so this is what I want. What do I need to verify? Can I just match the strings to each other? So let's try with this one. Let's go with this. Okay. What's this? It's just instantiating something but not actually using it? That's interesting. Is that how it's supposed to work? I'm wondering if there's not... So when I get into this area, I get a little nervous because if you screw something up, this can be a major security issue. So I'm wondering if there's a library out there that can do this sort of thing for me. So why don't I ask Copilot, can you recommend a .NET library that performs password hashing and matching for me? And we'll ask the same question to ChatGPT. Let's see what they have to say. Okay, so GitHub Copilot recommends bcrypt.net next. Simple API to hash passwords using bcrypt and verify hash passwords with a plain text password. That looks good to me. Okay, ChatGPT recommends using a Microsoft library. In fact, this might be a Microsoft library too, but it doesn't look like it. It recommends using password hasher in ASP.NET Core Identity. So which one should I use? Anybody have any recommendations out there for password hashing in .NET? And this example, null is passed to the hash password and verify hash password methods. Hashing verify password outside particular user context. Oh, that's interesting. So this is kind of this is a little bit hacky. So I'm not giving a username to this. I'm not a big fan of that. This bcrypt seems a little more interesting to me. Why don't I just go with that? I'm going to go with GitHub Copilot suggestion here. So let's delete all this. And I'm going to install bcrypt.net next. Let's look into that first. Okay, so 12.2 million downloads. That gives me a sense of, okay, people are using this library. A fixed, enhanced, and namespace compatible version of bcrypt.net port of JBcrypt implemented C#. It uses a variant of the Blowfish. Let me zoom in on this. Blowfish encryption algorithm's keying schedule introduces a work factor, which allows you to determine, I don't know what any of that stuff means, but I do like the future-proof part of this, which means that if something gets broken, then this will still work, maybe it's a small adjustment or something. So I like that. Let's go ahead and install that. Okay, yeah. Yep. Okay. So to hash that password, there's the hash, and plain password is like so. What I need to do is just return. Right? Okay, and then I can just say return hash password of submitted password equals hash password of Don't want this to be a static method too? I think I might. Submitted password string actual password hash. I don't want to hash that one. I just want to match it. Does that check out? But I like this structure. I'm not sure. Let me just, okay. I think if I leave this like so, I can just say password. So what I'm doing is in here, I'm getting that object, and does the password match? Submitted password. If it doesn't, then return unauthorized. Otherwise, we're good. Return a new user. I'm doing a new user here because I don't want to return the user directly. So I'm just going to create a new one, sort of a, and this might be better as a view actually. If I create a user view model, that might be a better way to go, I think. You know, you can have arguments back and forth about how many view models, you know, should you use view models? Should you just use the objects directly? How many is too many? Using bcrypt net core is way easier, by the way. Way easier than what I just did. Let's do user view model. Because that seemed pretty easy. Are you talking about bcrypt.net next? Or is there something else called bcrypt.net core? What is the difference? Is there a core? So why is this one way easier? Because what I'm looking at is basically one line right here. Which, you know, if it's easier, then let's use it. But tell me how and why. Okay, so I'm user view model here, which is going to be matching this. They are lightweight. Okay. Okay, so this user view model is only going to, okay, so this is going to have public, this might be a place for it to be a record, by the way. I've not used records very much. In fact, I don't think I've used them at all in anything that I've written. So I would definitely, you know, why would I want to use a record? This might be a place where I want to use AutoMapper, in fact. But let's just say user view model. And I'm going to pull this from the user object, email. Generate token, that's totally fine. User object dot username, which I guess is, wait a second. Is there something different than email address for username? There is. Okay, so the username exists. Get profile by username, follow user. What about update user? Looks like it does not use username at all. Okay, so you don't need to list properties with records. You just define them in the constructor, and then auto creates them and makes them fully serializable and forces you to put logic like that method somewhere else because those are just modals. You know, user view model, that might be fine for a record. Like, can I just say public record and just do the same thing here? And I could define them in the constructor, right? But I could also define them this way. Is that not the case? So yeah, there's a username. That's fine. I'm not going to use that as the key. So that's something that can be changed. Is the user name image? Okay. So this might be a case where user view. This might be a case where I might want to use AutoMapper. I'm kind of on the fence about that. You know, AutoMapper is cool, but I don't know if it's more trouble than it's worth for this project right now, especially because of this right here. That's going to be a special case, so I might have to add it after I do the mapping. Yeah, I'm not sure. So I'm going to change this to user view. bcrypt.net-core. So is it the same API? Why not? If I do I need to change any of this code, or is it bcrypt.core, that sort of thing? Why don't we ask GitHub Copilot? Give me some pros and cons for bcrypt.net. What was the other one? Next, and bcrypt.net core. How about a list? A list of pros and cons. Let's see what Copilot has to say. And I will also ask the same question to ChatGPT. Okay, here we go. Kind of hard to read in this Copilot here, but bcrypt.next supports .NET Standard 2 and above. .NET Core supports .NET Core 2 and above. That's an interesting distinction. Provides simple API for password hashing. Can be installed with NuGet. Yep. It's good security. Yep. Custom salt generator. Okay. I'm not actually using any salt here, but I don't know if I need to in this case. Requires .NET Standard 2, which is not supported by older versions of .NET Framework. Don't really care about that. Might have performance issues for large data sets or high frequency usage. So this is maybe what you're getting at there, Aaron, is that this is not the best choice for a lot of, if I'm doing this a lot. Yeah, bcrypt. Yeah, in general, bcrypt's a good choice because it's not just a .NET specific algorithm. It can be used with other languages if you want to. So this looks like all the same sorts of. Well, this says it supports Windows, Linux, and Mac. Probably is true about Next as well. Supports .NET Core 2 and above. This is interesting. The distinction between .NET Standard and .NET Core. I don't know if that's actually the case. Doesn't support older versions of .NET. That's fine. And this also might have performance issues for large data sets. So this pro and con analysis doesn't really seem to really tell me the difference between the two. So let's see what ChatGPT has to say. Or popular choices. Yep. So this is old information. Keep that in mind. They both provide a implementation of bcrypt hashing. Here are some potential pros and cons for each. So I don't know if it's just today, but ChatGPT is kind of going slow compared to Copilot. Of course, Copilot is a private beta, so it might have a much smaller user base. ChatGPT, much larger user base potentially. But I am GPT Plus, and I am using GPT-4. All right. .NET Next is actively maintained, updated more recently. Okay, I'm not sure if that's still the case. Direct and enhanced configuration supports more advanced features. Cons, some might consider it more complexity. Okay, I don't see much complexity here. I'm sure I could get crazier with it if I wanted to, but it seems pretty simple. Can lead to hash passwords that are not compatible with older configurations. Okay, maybe. Bcrypt.NET Core, simple, no extra complexities. So maybe the API surface level is smaller. Is that what you mean, Aaron, by Bcrypt.NET Core being more lightweight? There's less options, less I can shoot myself in the foot with. Good for projects, only need basic features. Okay, it says it's not been updated recently. I don't know if that's the case because, again, this is 2021. We could go and check that sort of thing. Really getting more bogged down in this than I was hoping, but let's see if we can get some quick information here. Bcrypt.NET Core. This is maybe the well, I hope this isn't it because this has not been updated in a while. So let's go to NuGet and figure this out. Bcrypt.NET Core. Okay, well, that looks like it. It was last updated in 2018. So again, doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, just that it hasn't been updated in a while. So if I go bcrypt.net and what was it? What was the other one? Bcrypt.net next. Hey Gamler, thanks for stopping by. Great to see you. I'll be back on Tuesday, same time. Love it if you stop by. So bcrypt.net next, it has been updated very recently. Oh no, well, still pretty over a year old, actually, for updates. Again, not necessarily a bad thing. Doesn't mean it's not working anymore. It just means that it hasn't been updated in a while. So where's the repo for that? License info. Where's the GitHub? Oh, here we go. So we got this one, and we got this one. This is under the official bcrypt project. So I think I'm going to stick with bcrypt next for now, Aaron. Seems to be fine. Okay. So this is going to be checking in Couchbase, and I don't have any users in there. So it should always be unauthorized at this point. This is a totally empty database right now. So let's just test it and see what happens. And as you recall from the last stream, I got to use Postman to do this. Although this endpoint probably is not authenticated, so it'll probably work in Swashbuckle too. Okay, so let's do a login. And it doesn't matter what email I put in here. So let's put in my Couchbase email and a password of password123. Okay, send, and I should get unauthorized. Okay. Document not found. Okay. So that is definitely an exception I need to handle. What that means is that document doesn't exist. So I'm doing the git here. Is there a exists? Yes, there is. So this is something else I need to check for. Collection exists. Oh no, model.user.email. And if user exists dot, I always forget the await. User exists dot exists. Let's say if it doesn't exist, then I'm going to again return unauthorized. This is something I would have caught in if I was writing a unit test, so I might want to get to that here sooner than later. Okay, running it again. Send. And now I get back what? Something went wrong. 401 unauthorized. I'm not sure what the error is. No data, empty input. That might be fine. That might be what it's supposed to be giving me. Empty input because it's 401. What do you think? Does that seem okay? I think I'm okay with that. Take these off here. Don't really need those. Okay. So this is working now. This is completely working. I could go ahead and create a user just manually. Back here in Capella. When doing domain-driven development, every modal I have is a record. Forces them to be stupid. Okay. We might get there. You're saying this, so I'm not sure what you mean by modal. Maybe you can define that. But we've got this user class here. This is meant to be like an entity that represents a document in the database. Is that what you mean by modal? And what you're saying is maybe I should make this a record and move this logic somewhere else. Perhaps I could. This seems like very much related to user. So it kind of makes sense to be in here. Anyway, let's go into users, and I'm going to create myself a, so I can't. I can't do this because I can't do the hash myself. So I need to create a second endpoint is what I need to do. And to do that, I need to go and get this registration one into progress. So these are kind of related. This one's kind of blocked by this one. So I need to create a registration endpoint. So let's go ahead and do that next. So This might be something you think would belong in the auth controller class. I think, we could call this a login controller class and just leave it as is. And let's create one called registration controller. As far as I know, there's not going to be any reuse between the, JWT token anywhere outside of this class, I think. So we'll just go with this. And I need to create a, let's see, is a post request according to the spec. So we'll call post. And the URL is API users. Don't need that leading slash. Oh, you're saying models. Oh gosh. So if you mean models just in general, model classes in general. So there is kind of a school of thought about models is, some of them should be really dumb DTOs, like a view model, for instance. I definitely agree that should be, very much no logic in there. And there's another school of thought that's like, well, why don't, instead of having these services that act on models, why not put the logic right there in the model if it's going to be using that code anyway, right? So, there's lots of different opinions on how to build models, and I think what you need to do is just keep evaluating that as you go. So we might go and change this. I mean, right now I've already introduced a user view model, which is another DTO, data transfer object. Is that what they stand for? Data transfer object. Again, all it does is exist to just bring a package of data. There's no logic here at all. It's just I'm bringing this to the UI in this case, which is a API. It's not really a website. It's an API endpoint. It's still a UI. So that seems reasonable there. And then I've got a data model which has a little bit more logic in it, because this is something that when interacting with the data from the database, this is hashing something that I'm going to have to do on a regular basis. So we're talking about now for my view model, I could instead of having all these public records here, or sorry, not records, these public properties here, I could have something like this, which makes it a little shorter, maybe a little less typing. This is an example from Microsoft's site, and it's using these attributes here to say this is how they're going to be stored in JSON. If you're using the system.text.json, which I don't think the Couchbase Net client is using, so I'm not to worry about that right now. But yeah, it's another way of doing it, of creating records if you want to go that direction. I'm perfectly fine with a little more typing. No big deal. I'm cool with that. But it's a relatively new feature of C#, so records, something that is good to know about. All right, so here we are at this is the endpoint that is called registration. So I'm going to call this task action results and registration. And this takes in a request body as well. So I'm going to call this registration. Really, this is a submit model. And I should call the other one a submit model as well, shouldn't I? Because it's being submitted. Yeah. So that's probably the wrong name. Let's go ahead and rename that while I'm here. Login submit model. Registration submit model. So I'll create that. And again, this could be a record. Totally fine to do that. I assume that will work fine with model binding. And user view model and login submit model can also be a record. Can I have a record with a record in it? Something like that? Yeah, that works. This is why a lot of companies roll Azure Active Directory or Auth0. Because of what? We need to scale. Yeah. I guess you could use Auth0 to provide JWT, I assume. That would be totally fine. or Azure Active Directory, or whoever else, Okta, etc. Okay, registration submit model. This is going to have, again, this has this weird user thing in here. Public registration. Might be a better way to handle this. Registration user submit model, but we'll just go with this for now. I'll have a public record. Okay, and then inside of that, username, email, password. So is there like a, yeah, there we go. The little shortcut. Prop, string, email, string, password. And that password will be plain text because it's someone submitting, saying, I want to register. Okay, so there we go. We have that. And so now what I need to do is I need to probably need to do some validation, right? And this might be where I actually do put some code inside of a model like this, is to validate. So we'll come to that. Okay, so I need to just insert this registration into database. That's all I need to do there. So to do that, we'll bring in the bucket provider again. And yeah, if you're ready to object to this, just stand by. I definitely plan to refactor these two to use Mediatr when we get there. Okay, and then I'll write some unit tests and some integration tests probably. Okay, so insert that into the database. So first we go to bucket. Bucket, I can't type await apparently. Bucket provider dot get bucket, and it is conduit. And collection equals await bucket dot collection async, and that is users. Okay, and then I'm going to insert that user, and it's going to return a user. Okay, so this user to insert equals new user. So I need to fill that out, and then I need to say await collection dot insert async, and it's going to be model dot user dot email, and then the user to insert. Okay. Now all I've got is the model dot, what's in here? Username, email, password. Okay, so username equals model dot user dot username. Email equals model dot user dot email. So I need to decide here, do I want to duplicate email? Because I'm using that as the key. Do I want to also have it be stored in the document? And I think I'm going to say no on that, because that could just lead to them getting out of sync in the future. And I want the email to be immutable. So that's something I've decided. And the password is going to be, I need to hash this password, all right? So now here's where my design is maybe, to Aaron's point, not the right one, although it is a static method. You're returning the unauthorized method. Am I way behind or something? Aaron, I'm not. Authorized method is way back in the auth controller. Returning unauthorized. Way back here. Yeah, returning unauthorized if the user doesn't exist or if password doesn't match. You might make an argument that this should be a not found, but I'm going to keep it unauthorized. Okay, so password is a static method, so I could say, wait, that's not the right one. Conduit.web.models user.hash password of the model.password. Model.user password. So this is where you might argue that, hey, this is kind of using another object static method. Maybe that's the wrong place for it. Okay, I could definitely see the reasoning there. So might revisit that when we get to refactoring. Okay, so it's creating the new user, inserting the user. Okay, and then I need to return a new, user view equals new user view model. I'm going to reuse that. And it's interesting is this spec does not include bio and image, anything like that. Go back to this endpoint here with the registration. It's returning a user. So it returns all these things. But, should it return the token? I think it probably should. So I have to generate a token for this as well. So there's actually, registration also includes elements of the authorization. Email, token, username, bio, image. Okay. So email equals model.user.email. Username equals model.user.username. Image equals null. Bio, I don't have to do this, right? Those are the default values, but I'm trying to be more explicit here. Token equals, and this is where the generate JWT token. So this is where I might argue, let's move this all over into the other controller. Back to auth controller. Okay. Generate JWT token of model.user.email. Although this says username. Where is that? Yeah. Okay. You know, it might be the case that I did this wrong, and this should be username. So let's go ahead and change that. Mini Wheats. Hey, what's going on? Thank you for the sub. I appreciate that. How are you doing there? Mini Wheats. Still using that same online name? Mini Wheats and I go way back into the early blogging days, and even before that, we used to work together, go to the same school. We go way back, me and Mini Wheats. What are you up to these days, Mini Wheats? Okay, this should be username. I'm going to do that everywhere. Should be username. Okay. Write the token. And this is fine to return these here because in the future state, those could exist. But we're registering, those were not part of the spec. So image and bio are always going to be null the very first time. But we will return a JWT token. And then return OK, new, and this same sort of weird embedded situation. Working as senior engineer at Prime Video, feeling old. Yeah, I didn't want to say anything. I wasn't sure if you wanted that information out there. But yeah, Mini Wheats is a senior engineer working at Prime Video, Amazon Prime Video. Some very cool stuff going on there. Very cool. Very excited for you, Mini Wheats. I am a Prime subscriber myself, obviously, as are many of my subscribers. So we appreciate your efforts on Prime Video. Let's see, let me think about this. So the last show I watched on Prime Video, let's see, what was it? That was a Netflix one. Let's see, what was the other one? I watched a documentary, I think. I watched a lot of documentaries on Prime Video. There's a lot of interesting documentaries out there. Let me tell you. one, actually. If I can digress for a second here. Let's go to Amazon here. I think this might be on Prime Video. If you've not seen this one yet, where is it? Is it this one? Yes. My Name is Salt. This is a documentary about salt harvesters, salt farmers. I'm not sure what the correct term is. It's really interesting. These families just come out here in like the middle of a desert in India, and they create these incredible kind of like little temporary homesteads and these little mines. I don't know if you call them mines or just sort of harvesting areas. And they show every step of the way. And they get washed away every year. So they got to rebuild from scratch every year to go in there and get a bunch of salt. And then, of course, they sell the salt for lots of different applications. Really fantastic. I found this on Amazon Prime Video. I recommend it. I actually want to go and watch it again. It's really interesting stuff. It's a very unique documentary in the sense that I don't think there's much in the way of narration. It's just watching people do this incredible work, and then watching the whole season, start and then how it ends. It's very, very interesting. Incredibly hard, backbreaking work to do this, but really interesting to watch. So thank you for your work on Prime Video to make that possible for me to check out. Okay. So there's no need to do any more. So insert. We're getting the user to insert. Yep. Insert. So this will actually, if I try to register the same email address again, this will cause an exception. You're not allowed to insert two keys of the same name. It is a constraint. So one thing we might do is put an exception handling around this. Is there a document exists exception? Yep. What is the problem? Oh, gotta be catch, obviously. Forgot how to write exceptions. Guy from Mars, what's going on? How are things on Mars these days? What? I forgot how to write code for some reason. There we go. I'm just thinking about salt. Welcome, Guy from Mars. Good to see you. So this should be return. There is a spec for this, error handling, yes. If any request fails any validation, 422. So is this validation? Or is this forbidden? Or could be unauthorized, arguably. 2TS. Oh, 2 T's, yeah. Right, Matthew with 2 T's, please. Let's see. We're going to call it forbidden, I think. Forbidden? Is it forbid? It's called forbid here for some reason, but yeah, so return forbidden 403. I might want to make a note, is that Couchbase keys must be unique. Registration shouldn't work if the email address is already in use. Okay. Okay, so at this point I can register, and then I can, that should log me in right there, but then I can also log in with that user if I want to. So let's give it a try, see if it works. Okay, go back to my endpoints. So registration should look like this. Let's register Jake from State Farm. Let's see if that works. So register. So there, that's the, I'm just going to paste this in. So let's go ahead and send it, see what happens. No authentication required for this. Null reference exception. Oh, goody. Gotta love a null reference exception. On auth controller line 62. Seems like it's not model binding correctly. Let's just do a debug and find out. Okay. Okay, so there we go. Getting the bucket from Couchbase, collection from Couchbase, that's fine. So what's the problem here? Model.user is null. User's right there. Why aren't you parsing it? I'm wondering if this has something to do with being a record versus being a class. One way to find out. Let's change this to class. Skip those. Those seem to work fine. Okay, back to Postman. Send. Still null. What is the problem here? Why isn't that binding? It was working up here for this one. Oh, aha. From body. So I can probably change that back to a record. Okay. Okay, ignore the swagger because it doesn't really, it has some issues. But let's go ahead and register Jake from State Farm. Okay, it works. And there's Jake from State Farm's token. If I go back over to Capella, sign back in, go to my data tools, buckets, conduits, default scope, users. There's Jake from State Farm. He is now registered. Email. Okay, this is an issue. Got to deal with that. Token is null. That also shouldn't be stored. No reason to store that. Username by image. Okay, so the issue there is that I do not want to store user and token, or sorry, email and token in the document. So if you notice, the ID has Jake's email address. I don't want to duplicate that. I might want to return that sometimes as the email, but I don't want to duplicate that. Token, I also don't want to store in the database. May want to in the future for security reasons. That's not part of the spec, so I'm not going to worry about that. So when it comes to this user, I need to decorate these first two with something. And is it decorate? Let me see if I can remember how to do this. So how do I make sure that a property of a class is not serialized to JSON? I believe this is using NewtonSoft. Let me just double check that while it's thinking about that. Dependencies, package, Couchbase. What? Don't I have Couchbase in here? Couchbase Net Client is using NewtonSoft. Yep, so still using NewtonSoft. You can, if you want to, switch out JSON libraries. You can use system.net.json, but the default is NewtonSoft. So, AJ 2017, thanks for joining. You're saying use JSON ignore. Let's see if ChatGPT agrees with you. Okay. To exclude, oh, sorry, not ChatGPT, GitHub Copilot. To exclude, use the JSON ignore attribute. This can be applied to a property. Okay. Only JSON serialization, not deserialization. Yes, that's good, I think. But what if I return this object to ASP.NET endpoint? Will it also be ignored? Yeah, it has been a while, AJ. Yeah, good to see you. JSON ignore. JSON ignore. In the latest SDK, we use the built-in JSON serializer to .NET. In the latest SDK, I'm using the latest SDK. System. Oh, there it is. System.text.json. Okay, they're both in there. Maybe NewtonSoft is still being used in some parts of it. So maybe I need to rethink my question here. And maybe I'm going to expand it as well. Using system.text.json? System.text.json, yeah. Serialize to JSON when being stored in Couchbase, but is returned by an ASP.NET endpoint. NUnit software is provided for backwards compatibility. Okay. Okay, so exclude property. Use a let's see. You can use JSON ignore. Okay. Include a property. Exclude a property. You know, I feel like I've done this before, but I can't remember. What I'm concerned about, well, you know what? I never return user. I never return user directly, so that's fine. I always return user view. So this is a good reason to split those up, models up as well. If I look at auth controller, I'm not returning user. I'm actually returning user view as a subobject, user view model, and it will always serialize those. That's fine. Okay, we're good. So I never want to serialize those, but I may want to actually provide them when I'm retrieving data from the database. Okay, so let's go back to my database. We're going to delete Jake from State Farm and try again. Delete. Delete. Okay. I might want to leave some comments about why I'm ignoring these. But let's make sure it works first. Jake from State Farm. Okay, that's good. Let's see, Miniwheats. Have you ever used any AWS services for this kind of work? Well, Miniwheats, I know you are an Amazon employee and you want to see AWS used. So what I'm using right now is actually Couchbase Capella. Is my database. Now I'm actually using it on Azure. However, Couchbase Capella does support AWS as well as Google Cloud. So all three of those are possible. This is the trial, so I'm limited in the regions I can choose from. Actually, that's a lot more than I'm expected in the trial. This might not actually go through because I'm in the trial, but select all these different regions. When you set up a new Capella trial, you can choose AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud, and with the trial, you can select one of 3 different regions for each. That's how it works. But yeah, these are all available regions right now for Couchbase Capella. Those are always expanding, as region capabilities expand, and Capella can add them. There's some prerequisites and things for all these different regions, but yeah, AWS totally fine. I'm just happen to be using Azure because I plan to probably deploy this to Azure as well in the future, as well as my Twitch bot is running on Azure. So it wouldn't make sense for me to have those on 2 different cloud services. It would probably work okay. It's just, may as well keep them on the same one until I need to do otherwise. So, okay, so I wanted to look at, let's see, where was it? Data tools. I wanted to look at Jake State Farm and see that he is stored correctly this time. Okay, and you can see there's no email in there, and there's no token, so those don't get serialized now, so they're not being stored. The password is still there. It's a bcrypt hash though, so even if you got a hold of this data somehow, you would have no idea what Jake's password is. You cannot decrypt this. It is a one-way hash effectively, at least for now. I mean, with the advancements in computing over maybe 5 or 10 years, maybe you can decode these sorts of things. But for right now, no. Can't do that. So that's good. We're good. And so I want to leave a comment here, ignoring this, because the document ID is the email address. Don't store duplicate data. Ignoring this because JWT's token should not be stored in database for now. There are some reasons you might want to store JWT tokens. Aaron, thank you for the sub. I appreciate it. By the way, I forgot to mention this. You should all follow Aaron as well. He's got a Twitch stream coming up soon. He'll be doing some mobile stuff. So if you're into mobile dev, this is the guy you need to follow. And go check him out. BioZal. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. BioZal, Biozal. Don't know. Which one? Which one's correct? I just rattled off three different ones. Okay. So for the user, all I'm storing right now is username, bio, image, and password. That's really all that's stored, and email is the ID. So that's all that's stored for the user. So I think we're good to go. Yeah. So what password did I use for Jake? I used Jake as his password. So we could try the login token as well. If I use Jake and Jake as the password, this should also work. It's unauthorized. Why is that? That's not correct. Okay, well, we got to figure that out and debug that. Why isn't the login working? BIOS OWL, okay? It's binary input output zeros, Aaron LeBeau. Oh, okay. Interesting. ZOS equals zone enabled operating system. All right, so it's like 3 different levels of acronyms there. All right, so let's go ahead and try this again, and we'll walk through with the debugger, see where the problem is. Computer science from the 90s. Okay, so yeah, that's correct. This user exists. Yes, user exists. Email, yep. Does password match? So this might be where the issue is. I don't know. Submitted password. The hash of that equals password. Can I do this and see what it is? And yeah, those are matching. Oh, those are not matching. Why aren't those matching? That doesn't make any sense. It should always match. What am I doing wrong here? So that's going to be unauthorized. Yep. Because the passwords aren't matching. Equals password. What am I doing wrong? So registration code, I'm going to delete that while I'm thinking about it. Oh, nope, not that. Nope, this one. Delete? Why isn't delete working? Oh, because I'm in debug mode. Delete. Why isn't the password matching? That doesn't make any sense at all. Where's my data? So I'm hashing it based on the password, which is Jake, right? Saving that, and then I'm just checking it again. not program, here, hashing it the same way. What could possibly be the problem here? The seed. Okay. Do I need to set a seed? I was kind of thinking along those lines, but I didn't set one. Let's ask Copilot. That's the issue. Do I need to use a seed with bcrypt.net -next? So for those watching, a seed is something you use when you're generating random numbers, because in reality, random numbers in computer science aren't really random. So this is saying it's recommended to use a unique salt. Okay, so do I need to store the salt with the password? I could also use the same salt for everybody, right? But it's more secure to use a different salt for each one. Okay. Yeah, all right, so I need to save the salt. Okay, password, right here. Hash the password. Well, I should probably generate a salt, right? Equals b, well, I can say models.user.generate salt. And then password salt equals password salt. So there we go, and I can just say return bcrypt.net bcrypt.generate salt, and I can give it some sort of factors there, but it doesn't really matter. It says right here the default is a reasonable number, I guess. So whatever it's using, that's fine. Mini wheats. To be fair, nothing can be random. Well, that's a little bit of a what's it called? Philosophic issue. So random numbers, just if I can digress for a little bit here, is a very interesting problem because, like I said, in computer science, there is no true random. You can't generate a truly random number. And in fact, that can be exploited because random numbers are used a lot in these types of things, hash, encryption, passwords, and so on. So there is this interesting thing that Silicon Graphics designed called LavaRand. And it uses lava lamps, a whole rack of lava lamps. And it takes pictures of the patterns in those lava lamps and turns those into random numbers. It turns that into a seed to be used for what's called pseudo-random numbers. So this is an attempt at a true random number generator, because in order to break this, you'd have to be able to predict the patterns of lava lamps, which is, as far as I know, not possible, or computer science we say NP complete or something, not possible in a reasonable amount of time. So this is one of the attempts at creating true random numbers. So this is definitely an interesting rabbit hole for computer science, but we're not going to go into that. But yeah, there is no such thing as a purely computer-generated random number. You might argue that lava lamps are more of a true random, and that's why you could use something like that. But in the more philosophical sense, nothing can be random. Well, then we got to think about the creation of the universe, and you're talking about what's the word? The philosophic determinism and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. We're not going to get into that here. Okay. So salt. When I register, I create a salt. And then to check login, we have to add the salt to that. Model.user.password salt. Why isn't that user? Oh, no. Don't have to do it there. So we go into this, and we have the password salt, so submitted password salt, and string password salt. So, wait, no, wrong one. Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is where it goes, right? Password salt, hash password, and then pass in the salt here. Yep. Pass the salt, please. This would be a string. Password salt. If hash password equals password, I think that'll do it. Okay. So we're getting to the point where this is probably should be going into its own class, but we'll see. Okay. So let's go back to our database, and we're going to delete again Jake from State Farm because there's no hash in there. No salt, I should say. Build errors. Uh-oh. Any kind of type restart. Well, I'm not even starting. Oh, it's because it's already running. Sorry. There we go. Off the screen, it was already running. So what? Okay, I missed something here. This is registration. Oh, okay. Yeah. That needs to go in there. Okay, we'll try it again. Back here to register. Registering Jake from State Farm. There he is. Back to my data. There's Jake, and now he has this nice password salt in there. And so if I go back to login, I'll try to log him in, and it should work this time, and it does. Okay. Got to have the salt. Okay. So we've got two endpoints working now. We've got the login and we've got registration. And they're both working, and they're creating the user in the database right here. And then we can, once we have this information going forward, you can use that to authorize the other endpoints. So time to commit. Back over here. I'm going to commit this, and this is really parts of number 1 and number 2. Let's see if that works in GitHub. I don't know. We got this migration stuff. It didn't really work, but I'll look into that later. So we added registration endpoints and added DB checking to login endpoint. Okay. Everything looked good there. I deleted the delete me. So I like to go through and look at the diffs to see what I changed and if it makes sense. Dependency injection, yeah. I never did add the Couchbase library itself. That's okay. I don't need to because it's part of the dependencies of the dependency injection. Okay, these are the endpoints here. Looks good. That's gone. User, I added a couple ignores and some code here that might need to be factored out. To program, I just added dependency injection. Login view model's gone. App settings at JSON I'm not going to show you, but I probably shouldn't commit that either, right? In fact, I probably need to commit a like a blank version of that, and then add it to git ignore. That's, well, I don't know if that's going to work either. I'll figure that out. Okay. Solution, dev version. Yeah, I have a dev version. Actually, let me just double check this. I think I might be good, in fact. Yeah, okay. Dev version is not going to be checked in, but the regular app settings JSON is fine to be checked in as is. This is what it looks like. Just generic stuff in there. Nothing, no credentials I care about. App settings dot developer. That one is not being checked in. So that's good. It might be on the git ignore, in fact. Let me just look at that real quick. App settings. Oh yeah, here we go. So release and production. Oh, there's a Twitch bot though. See, I copied this from another repo. But yeah, that'll work. So development, that's good. Let's try this again. So I made changes to the git ignore. Okay, so app settings is good. You can see I just added the Couchbase section there. It's good to go. Here's the migration stuff and the new models that I added. That also should not be committed because that's got credentials in it. So I'll probably need to add that to ignore as well. Don't worry about that just yet. But okay, number 1 and number 2 added registration endpoints and updated login endpoint to use DB. Let's say Couchbase. Okay, and we're going to push that out. Push it on out. So then if I go back to my GitHub repo, I'm just kind of interested to see how that affects the GitHub projects, or the GitHub issues, I guess. Push it. Calvin's back. Dun, 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 dun. Push it real good. Am I going to get a copyright violation for that? So here are the issues. Yeah, look at that. Just number 1, number 2, it showed up there. OMG, what? My singing's that bad? Welcome back, Calvin. How was your meeting? Okay, so there is the repo of the project, I guess. And you can see just 1 minute ago, pushed all these nice new things. It's a great 90s reference. Okay. I guess. All right, so here we are. We got about an hour left. I don't know if I'm going to get to everything I wanted to get to. Y'all got me on tangents, but that's okay. So the next thing I want to do is possibly using Mediatr, because there's a lot of stuff in my endpoint right now. Look at all this stuff right here. I want the actions in my controllers to be very, very thin as possible. It'll make them easier to test, and it will be, less stuff to go wrong in ASP.NET. Let's see, Coding with Calvin. It was good talking to a guy that got laid off from Tech Elevator recently, looking into New Relic and getting into dev. So are you going full CQRS? I don't need to go full CQRS for this. It's just using Mediatr to kind of push the logic and database access off outside of ASP.NET. So Calvin, New Relic. So the kind of stuff Calvin is working on, it seems like it's really requires like advanced coding experience. Maybe I'm wrong. But does New Relic have those kind of positions where you could be relatively new to dev, or maybe not that much experience, and then get started there? Again, I'm just putting you on the spot here, so sorry, but I'm just kind of curious about that. Like, what, if I'm a new developer, would that be a good place to start? I feel like I would get fire hosed pretty hardcore, because you're talking about building dev tools for developers to help them develop better. So it's kind of like meta coding in a sense. Seems like it might be a tricky place for someone to start. They have some summer internships, so that's cool. He was looking at positions he's previously worked in, but also getting into dev on the side. I see. So he's done something like, maybe he's been in marketing or accounting or something, and maybe trying those positions at New Relic, product manager, whatever, and then do some coding on the side. Cool. Yeah, that's good to hear. You can, if you want to, you can drop a link to New Relic jobs if you want to, right there in the chat. Or maybe you should just contact Calvin directly, and he can refer you to stuff going on at New Relic. Doing some very cool stuff there. All right, so let's get Mediatr going here. Let's talk about what Mediatr is first. So Aaron associates it with CQRS, and it can be a full CQRS, but really it's just a way to pass messages between parts of your code base, and to do so without something like RabbitMQ or Kafka or something like that. It's just messaging in process between, I'll say, C# classes, right? And you can do request response, which I mostly am doing that, commands, queries. You can do notifications, all kinds of dispatching options there. It's something I use already in the Twitch bot that's running right now. If you're interested in checking it out, you can do bang help. As you can see down here, bang help for commands with the Twitch chat bot. I'm using it there, and it kind of helps organize code a little better. And like I said, to keep the controller methods relatively slim, which right now you can see they're basically implemented, right? This is probably how it's going to look from this point forward, but it's still very big. I want to make changes to this, then, you know, I've got to, if I want to make tests to this, I've got to, you know, write some ASP.NET mocks or build up a controller, and those sorts of things are easier than they used to be. Let me tell you, way back in the day, those tests were very difficult. But it's still, if I want to test just this logic, for instance, then I have to mock out ASP.NET methods, or classes, mock out Couchbase classes, mock out any sort of JWT or token stuff. So it can be a lot of work to write those tests, and therefore it can be a problem when you want to go and make changes. It can introduce bugs, unexpected behavior, and so on. So I'm going to use Mediatr to try to improve that a little bit. So how do we get started with Mediatr? We add it via NuGet. This is called Mediatr, if you will. Created by the great Jimmy Bogard, who has possibly the most immaculate hair of any developer I've ever seen. I've seen it in person, up close. It's incredible. Okay, and Mediatr. All right, so then basically all I just do is I have to add some dependency injection stuff. So I can do this right here. If I go back to my program, it's over in services again. So we'll do builder.services, add Mediatr, and we just have to pick a class that has all the Mediatr classes in it, and that would be this one. This has startup, but we can just say program as well. Be totally fine. So it's going to look through, it's going to find this class, get the assembly from whatever that class is in. So an assembly, you can kind of think of that as a compiled version of this project. So it's going to look in this project for any Mediatr services that it needs to know about. All right, and I can also do that with an assembly if you wanted to. Same sort of thing. I could just say type of the class, the same sort of thing. So these are all the things that it registers, and it will register generics for these as well. And it can also register behaviors. I'm not going to use a behavior, I don't think, but there we go. So Mediatr is ready to go. Now I just need to remember how I actually go about doing this. So, so let's start with the login, and we're going to bring in, what is the classes? I can never remember these classes. I can look at my Twitch bot though, and it will have them for me. Okay. All right, so we have something called iMediatr. Mediatr. And I'm going to comment out the bucket provider here, and you'll see why in a second. Introduce Mediatr there. So now, what I could do is I could say login result equals Mediatr dot send new login, is it request? Is that what they're supposed to be? And I could even pass model to that class. Okay, and then I could say if login result dot is unauthorized, then return unauthorized. Otherwise, return basically this right here. Except I'm going to say login result.userView. And so all this code disappears from this action. Okay, but you see there's lots of red because I haven't actually created these yet. So let's go to our solution here. And I'm going to create a folder called requests, maybe. Inside that folder, I'll create one for auth. So I'll create a class called login request. If I can type it correctly. Wow, that was pretty bad. Okay. So that also changes the name of the file, which is nice. So now I have login request, and I will make that be a constructor there. Just doing that, just passing that right through. So that login result, well, there isn't one yet, right? So we've got login request, login result, and I should have, whoops, another class called, maybe, login request handler. So this is the thing that Mediatr will pick up on automatically, is when I say, Mediatr, here's a login request, Mediatr then goes through its, whatever information it's collected and says, ah, I found a handler for that request. So I believe, if I remember correctly, this has to inherit from something. And I'm still cheating and looking at my old projects so I can remember how to do this. I probably put those in a separate project, yeah. Okay, so it's going to be I request handler. And so there's, I can give this types. So I can say login, so this is a login request, and it's going to return a login result. I think that's right. Login result also needs to be of type I request, I believe. Yes. Maybe? Have I got this backwards? All right, I can go look at the docs here. Wiki, examples, okay. I request of request of a string. What's the string? That's what's returning. Okay. I request handler. Yeah, I want to return a. Yep. Yep. What doesn't it like here? Login request handler? Oh, is it? Wait, what? I request login result. Okay. Yes, okay, that's right. So this is what the request itself is returning. Does that make sense? I think so. Yes, so I'm passing in the request of login request. If we go back to this, yep, okay. And then login result, I'm going to add, oops, what happened there? I wanted to add this method. Oh, this should, gosh, should be a wait. Okay, create a property. Okay, so potentially the results of this could be either, hey, you're unauthorized, or yes, you're authorized, and here's the user. In this case, it's going to be user view. It doesn't know what type to use there, so I'm just going to say user view model. Okay. So then I can take this code and put it into this handler. All right. And because this is using a database, using Couchbase, I need iBucketProvider here. Okay, so then let's uncomment this. This needs to be async. Okay, so far that code's fine. Make sure the credentials match. All right, in this case, I've got the request dot, oh, I don't have a request. There's nothing in the request yet. So this needs to be, so I could make this public. It does not need to be a read. Public read, oh yeah, I can make this read only, right? Yeah. There's no need to make any changes to that. It should be immutable as far as the Mediatr is concerned. So this should be request.model.user.email. And if that doesn't exist, we're going to return a new login result where unauthorized, or is authorized equals false. Okay, so I'm not using the ASP.NET method there. I'm just returning a plain C# object. Okay, and we'll do the similar thing here. Yep. Using the word user can be problematic. There's lots of things that have user. So request.model.user.email. Seems like a lot of periods. I don't know if I like that, but this is kind of the embedding due to the conduit specs. This is going to be login result here. Same thing. So we're just checking. Let's see. Make sure user exists. Then make sure password matches. And then create this user view model. Generate JWT token. And we're getting further into the region where this should probably live in its own class or own service, right? And then return new login result is unauthorized equals false, which is the default setting, but we'll just be explicit. And user view equals user view. Okay. So there we go. Now here's a question for you. If I want to make this JWT token logic into its own service, do I make it a Mediatr? Do I have Mediatr do that? So let's ask Copilot. Does it make sense for Mediatr? What are they called? They're called request Mediatr handlers to themselves call Mediatr call other themselves make their own mediator requests. Let's see what Copilot has to say about that. And if you have opinion in the chat, go ahead and chime in, especially if you've used Mediator before. It's generally not recommended for Mediator handlers to make their own Mediator requests. This can result in tight coupling between handlers and lead to more complex and difficult to maintain code. That makes sense to me. It's usually better to move the shared logic to a separate class or service and have both handlers rely on that instead. Instead of one handler calling another directly using Mediator, consider extracting the logic that is needed in a separate class or service where both handlers can call it through injection. Okay. What are you saying? Authentication service. Yeah. Yes, that's where I'm going with this, I think, Aaron, is anything with JWT or it might be separate classes, actually. JWT or password hashing, move to its own service. So you can swap them out. Yeah, I could swap those implementations out if I wanted to, right? If I wanted to go to auth0 or whatever, I could do that. So I will create another folder here called services. And we're going to create a service called auth service. And we're going to move generate JWT token into auth service. Make it public. Okay. Okay. And then this will have to be something that I put into services, builder.services.add. Wait, is it to add transient? Yeah, transient. Auth service. So that will be injected itself into something like this. Auth service. Oops. I don't want to do that. I want to, yes. Okay. And then I can say auth service.generate JWT token. So now that logic's moved into its own reusable service that is no longer tightly coupled to this login code here. So its primary job is to check that the user exists, make sure the password matches, which is basically the same thing. It's not, I don't want to use the word and too much because that's not a single responsibility, but make sure the password matches. I can only do that if the user actually exists. And then return that user with the token. Token actually being generated by a whole other class. Okay, so there we go. So this this controller is already slimming down quite a bit. I can remove some of these usings. This is a much, much smaller action here. So now I have to do the same thing for registration. So we can say var registration result equals await mediator dot send new registration request, again with model. And we can say something like if registration result dot user already exists, then I can return forbid. Otherwise, I can do basically this down here. User equals registration result dot user view. So once again, I comment all this code out. Okay, so now let's create some more handlers over here. We'll call this one registration request. Oh, too many windows. So that is just going to be, again, I request. But I want it to be registration result. Might be a better name for that, like registration request result, something like that. But let's just go with registration result for now. And I'll need a handler for it as well. Registration request handler. Just I request handler. It's going to, I gotta get the order right in my mind here. This is the request, so registration request, registration result. What's the problem here? Oh, yeah. No, this needs to be request. Is that right? Is that what I did over here? Login request. It says login result. I request login result. I'm doing something wrong. Oh, I got it in both places. Result. There we go. Okay. Why doesn't it like that? Oh, yeah. I think it's still backwards. Oh, my goodness. This is, I think, my one complaint with Mediatr is that I have a hard time keeping track of which is first and which is last. I think if I knew my generics better, I would know this should be the result, and these are the ones going in, but it's still hard for me to keep straight in my mind. So that's my failing, I guess, not really a Mediatr problem. Okay. This needs a constructor. Let's call this registration model. And again, I can make this public, but read-only. Okay, and back over to here. User already exists. Create that property. User view. Won't know what that object's yet, but it's user view model. Okay, so that's all it's going to be in the controller action. Let's take this, and we're going to put that in this code here. What happened here? Oh. Okay, and so insert. So I need, okay, forgot Couchbase. Bucket provider. Okay, needs to be async. Okay. So, yep. So this generates salt stuff. That I might want to put into that authorization service. I'm not sure yet. Request.model. There's nothing in the request, is there? Oh yeah. Oh, I'm just going to call it model, not this registration model stuff. That's a little bit redundant, the way I'm going to use it. Okay. Okay, so that code's all fine. Then we'll try this. Request.model. But instead of returning forbid, we're going to return new registration result where user already exists equals true. Okay, and that just means that, hey, you're trying to register, you've already registered basically, or you're trying to register for someone else's email address. Should not be allowed. Okay, here's the user view. So this will be model dot, wait, no, request.model dot user dot email request.model username, no image, no bio, token. I have to bring that auth service in here as well. It's again going to be auth service dot generate JWT token based on the username. And want to return new result where, again, user already exists equals false. That's the default value, but just trying to be explicit. And user view equals user view. Okay. So I need to move some of these into their own file, I think. What is this misbehaving for? Oh, I've got a stray, or I'm missing a, there we go. Move that. And what in the world? What in the world happened here? Okay. No, not create derived type. Darn it. Move this to its own file. Come on, work with me here. There we go. Okay. So is anyone still with me? So I went kind of fast there, but you can see that each one of these handlers is kind of its own little island of functionality. And each handler, in my case, is getting a request, which is what triggers the handler to be created by Mediatr. And then it returns a result, which is what's being given back to ASP.NET, to the web request. So if I log in, try to log in, I'm submitting this model. This is my information to log in. I'm passing that, I'm wrapping that in a request, passing it to Mediatr. Mediatr does its logic, figure out, okay, does this user have valid credentials? Do they exist, etc. It's going to give me a result. The result could be it's not authorized, and we could add other ones in the future here. But if it's not authorized, then return ASP.NET's unauthorized. Otherwise, return the view to the user. Same thing down here. It's almost the exact same code. In fact, the exact same structure. You can see. In fact, we moved it on one line, so it looks a little neater. So each of these actions is all it's doing is just handling the ASP.NET, the routing, collecting the information, passing off to Mediatr. Mediatr's doing all the work, coming back with some results, and then ASP.NET is handling those results. So that's all ASP.NET's doing in this case. I don't have to, the ASP.NET knows nothing about the database. I don't need bucket provider here anymore. All I need to know about is the requests. In this case, what auth? What's the auth request? What's that one? Okay. These are the requests. Maybe we should move those to responses. I don't know. I got to come up with a better name for that, maybe. Because under this requests, but it's not just requests. So maybe I come up with a better namespace for that. All I need to know about is the Mediatr classes, Mediatr itself, the view models that are being returned to the user, and an MVC. So it's very, very thin. It's just doing the bare minimum that I need to interact with ASP.NET MVC. So hypothetically, if there was some framework other than ASP.NET that I wanted to use for web development in .NET, I could use the same Mediatr classes and just switch this code here. However, there used to be something called, was it Nancy? It was a .NET web framework, and there's other ones out there. They're not very popular. They used to be more popular back in the day because ASP.NET used to be kind of a mess. But I could potentially use this with like server-side Blazor, for instance. I could use the same Mediatr requests and responses. So I'm decoupling. I'm making these more loosely connected with each other, which is going to help for a lot of reasons. Help with testing, yes. Help with maintenance, because now I can, if I'm making a change to some login logic or how the data is being stored, I don't have to touch ASP.NET at all. That can stay exactly the same. I can just go to these Mediatr classes. So what's a better name for this than requests? Because it's not just requests. This is more like, I don't know. Yeah, I want to say services, but it's not quite a service either. That's only a little separate from that. So, but well, you know what? I don't know. What do you think? Should I combine services and requests? Just call it services? I have to think about that. Okay, but so let's see if it still works. Actually, that's the important thing. Is this going to work? I haven't actually tried it yet. Got build errors, so a typo someplace. Yep. Just didn't close the class down there. Okay, so it's going, and may as well just go ahead and get rid of Jake from State Farm again. Again, this might be a good place to use some integration testing. So I don't have to do this manual stuff, but we haven't gotten there yet. We're not there yet. I'm probably not going to get there today, unfortunately. I was hoping to get some unit tests in, but we're running low on time. And I've got actually a hard stop at noon. So, okay, delete Jake from State Farm. Let's go ahead and register him again. See if it still works. And success. Okay, and then let's try logging him in. Success. So it still works. All I did was just refactor. Now, again, if I had tests in place, I would want to have those tests run, make the changes, run them again. I don't have those quite yet. I haven't got around to it. I will get to that before I build anything else, because right now I'm pretty happy with the way this project is structured. I just need to figure out this organization here. So if you have any suggestions about how to organize this a little better, I'm open for it. And one thing I might want to do, in fact, is completely organize this in a different way around features, right? So as far as auth goes, this auth controller, these auth requests, and this auth service, those are all related to auth in my application. The model user is kind of related to auth. Might want to refactor these things actually, because this is really more related to, related to database than it is to auth specifically. So I'm not going to keep those separate. I'm not going to call this database models perhaps, or data access models. I'm not sure yet. So I don't know. I'll think about that some. Might want to do some reorganization. But speaking of, we've got a few minutes left. Why don't I go ahead and refactor this to be inside of the auth service as well. I just feel like it's kind of in two places. This is not strictly speaking auth related, but it kind of is, right? It's password hashing. So I'm going to make these not static anymore. Yeah, this is getting kind of a lot of parameters here. Password from database, password salt. So do it like this. These other ones can stay the way they are. So now I'll compile to see where stuff broke. Yep. So right here, instead of user generate salt, I'm going to say auth service.generate salt. Instead of user.hashpassword, I'm going to say auth service.hashpassword. With these things right here. And there's one more, could be one more place, right? Right here. Okay, so instead of that, I'm going to say if auth service.does password match. This is where it gets a little bit like, oh, so many parameters. Password from database is user obj.password, and then salt is user obj.password salt. Okay. So now it's going to compile. So again, should be running unit tests to see if this refactoring works. But all I can go on right now is manual tests. Didn't have time to get to it, unfortunately. I have some really cool plans for test containers, and unit tests, and using GitHub Actions for CI. We'll have to wait to get to that next time. So let's get Jake's State Farm out of here again. So if user containers, I know they retweeted me yesterday or something. So if anyone's watching, sorry I couldn't get to test containers today. I will get to it next Tuesday. That is my plan. So here we go. We're going to register Jake from State Farm. Success. And log in, Jake from State Farm. Oh, that is not what I wanted. What happened there? Is unauthorized. Let me just double check that. Sometimes I get the booleans messed up. So if user doesn't exist, authorized equals false. Ah, yep, here it is. Just one little. This is why unit tests are so important, or testing in general is so important. There's just one little character completely messed up my my authorization workflow there. So, okay, we're going to remove Jake from State Farm yet again. State Farm getting a lot of sponsorship, a free sponsorship today. Okay, back to registration. Success, login, success. Okay, there we go. So, I'm going to wrap up here because just about done for today. It's a pretty good stopping point. Make sure I don't have any breakpoints or code that's commented out. Get rid of that. So at this point, this database user does become something of a dumb object, right? So we could maybe transform this into a record like Aaron was talking about earlier. I'm not quite sure yet. Why is this token saying it's not being used? The token were not found. Oh. Yeah, I never store the token in the database, so I don't know why I even have this in here, actually. I'm not even using it. I'm just sort of like these registration requests, put the token in the view model. They do not need to go to the database at all. So that is just code I can delete. And it should still work. Again, unit tests will be fine here, but I know for my tools that it's not being used at all. So email is the only thing I need to worry about. I don't need to have token in my database user class at all. So, okay. All right, so let's do another commit here, and then we'll wrap it on up. So zproj, and it is real world. Commit. Okay, this is going to be number 1 and number 2. So refactor to use Mediatr, and refactored token auth stuff into auth service. Okay. All right. So all we did here was add Mediatr, and I added the services folder. Might need to rethink that structure. Auth controller. Look, it went from this huge 113 lines down to 37 lines. Fantastic. User model. So took out all the salt stuff. Took out the token. Don't need that. That was vestigial. Here's the program. All I did here was add Mediatr and add auth service as a function. It's an uncommon Git GUI client. You know, sometimes I get grief for using Tortoise Git is what it's called. But I am very much so. I mean, it's my hypothesis. There's kind of two different camps of developers. There's ones who just live and die by command line. Totally fine. Appreciate that. I love it that you can memorize all those commands and all those flags and things. And then there's the UI, where it's like, okay, this is making it a little easier for you. Maybe it's a little slower if you're not used to the UI. But I feel like it makes my life easier, and I'm much more on the UI end of the spectrum. I definitely appreciate command line. We're going to see some of that on Tuesday for sure. But I like Tortoise Git a lot. I've been using it for years, and I'm very happy with it. I used Tortoise SVN before. My last company I worked at was, at the time, on Subversion and moving to Git. So I got very used to Tortoise SVN. And when I switched to Git, I was like, is there a Tortoise for Git too? And yes, there is. There's Tortoise Git. So I like it a lot. But if you want to use command line, that's totally fine. Again, I totally respect your ability to remember all those commands and not make typos and things like that. So that's not my jam at all. there's all the new classes I created, so I got to rethink about this structure, but we'll go with it for now. Commit. Calvin, what's wrong? Not like this. What's the problem? We're going to push it real good. Dun, 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 dun. So there we go. Another commit. Let's look at the, not actions, projects. We'll look at actions maybe on Tuesday. So here we go. Did I finish these things? Well, not really. I haven't written any tests for these as well. So I will leave those in progress until I finish tests. Oh, Gitkraken, yeah. Another great UI is Gitkraken. I tried Gitkraken for a little while, a long time ago, in fact. Maybe I should revisit it. But another very good UI for Git. I just kind of found that I'm so accustomed to Tortoise Git that I just kind of felt like the Gitkraken transition was too much for me. Maybe I can revisit it in the future. But oh yeah, okay. Still need to add tests. I'm just gonna leave a comment for myself here. Git fork is good too. I've not used Git fork at all. I haven't heard of it, in fact. It's hard to switch. Yeah, I mean, it is hard to switch anything, really. Change is hard, but sometimes it's worth it. So I might fire up Gitkraken again, and maybe, Calvin, we could do a stream where you help me walk through it. I know it's something you use a lot, so I can kind of describe my normal workflow with Tortoise Git and see where Gitkraken can maybe save me some time or clicks or headaches. Aaron's using Git fork, saying Gitkraken is too heavy. I'm getting to know more about you on the stream, Aaron, that you're really into the more lightweight stuff. I mean, command line is truly the most lightweight if you want to go by that measure, but yeah, I mean, you were like, oh, that bcrypt library is too heavy, and Gitkraken is too heavy. So that's definitely interesting to get your perspective on these things and what you consider to be heavy and what's the lightweight alternative. So very cool. Thank you for that. All right, we're going to wrap up now. I'm going to do a raid. Twitch.tv/team/livecoders. Let's see who's out there and who gets a raid, what they're doing. So we've got finite singularity, coding some OBS transitions. That's kind of interesting. What is Paragon stream doing? Looks like that's in a non-English stream, so I'm not going to probably go there. It looks like it's just going to be finite singularity today. We're going to raid finite singularity, if I can spell it correctly. So join me over there. Here's the, I believe, don't I have a raid? Maybe it's defend or something. I don't know. Anyway, interested, join me over there on Finite Singularity. I'll be there for a few minutes. I got a meeting at 12, though. Thank you very much for joining me, everybody. I'll be back on Tuesday, same time, 9 a.m. Eastern U.S. time. We're going to get some tests in. That is my goal for Tuesday. So I hope you enjoyed it today, and we'll see you then. Have a good weekend, everybody.